For the past 15 years now, I have done research on how we can help people become better leaders. And during that time, I've made the most curious of observations that I would like to share with you. Imagine this. I walk into a room, and this room, it's filled with executives. And I ask these executives a very simple question. Who here is in a position of leadership? All hands go up. My next question, however, is only keep your hands up if you feel that you've been sufficiently trained to be a leader. Now, I've tried, and I've tested this around the world, and I get the same response. Almost all of those hands go down. Isn't that curious? These people are in a position of leadership, but they don't feel that they've been trained for it. Now imagine the following. Now I walk into a hospital. There's a room full of surgeons there. And ask the same questions. Who here is a surgeon? All hands go up. Who here was trained to be a surgeon? All hands would stay up. And I could replace surgeon with civil engineer or psychotherapist, or for that matter, any other profession, and I would get the same response. These people were trained for the job. And it only makes sense, right? It only makes sense because we wouldn't put a scalpel into some person's hand, ask them to operate on us without guarantee that this person actually knows what they're doing. However, we are willing to, for example, elect politicians into a role of leadership without any guarantee that they were trained for the job. My name is Hannes Leroy, and as you can probably tell, I am very passionate about making sure that the leaders of our world get the development that they deserve. But to really understand why that is my passion, I have to go back in time a little bit to my own very first leadership position. Now, this takes me back to my own high school experience. And against my own expectations, I was voted to be class president. Now, I can tell you at that young age, that felt pretty good, right? I mean, to have your peers tell you, we want you to be our leader. And I remember that with a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of energy, I worked day in, I worked throughout the night, and I tried to be the best leader possible, and I failed. And in fact, I failed quite miserably. Don't get me wrong, it's not like these colleague students chased me down the schools with pitchforks or torches or anything. However, I did make some basic mistakes that are not just reserved for high school presidents, but that I see country presidents, CEOs of companies also make. Let me just give you one example, right? I think one of the reasons why my peers voted me to be a leader is I have a lot of drive, I have a lot of energy, and I'm a person who gets things done. I'm a high achiever. And so it made sense for me to be the leader, right? Except leadership is not about excelling and achieving yourself. It's about helping others, making sure that others excel. But that was a lesson that I didn't know and I didn't understand at the time. I've made many other mistakes since then, and I could spend a lot more time focusing on all the mistakes I've made. However, instead, let me tell you on what happens next. Because I was faced with this problem. On the one hand, people clearly saw me as a leader, but I clearly lacked the skills and the competencies needed to be a leader. So after my high school, I decided to study psychology. Because I was thinking, if I want to be a better leader, I need to make sure that I understand what makes people tick, what drives them, what motivates them. And I didn't stop there. After that, I did a PhD in leadership, and I went on to be a professor in leadership for 15 years. During that time, I've learned a lot of what it takes to be a better leader. I'm not going to bore you with all the details, but there's one clear truth that stands out that I would like to share with you. Leadership is not something that people are born with, nor is it some sort of magic or an art form. Leadership, plain and simple, it is something that you can learn how to get better at. Leadership is something you can learn how to master. And we've got about 100 years of leadership research that gives you a clear indication of what you should and what you shouldn't do. And I wish I could go back in time and tell the younger version of myself some of these tips and tricks to make sure that I didn't make those mistakes. Of course I can't. I can't go back in time. Well, what I can do is dedicate myself to make sure that the leaders of our world, and I'm talking all the way from class presidents to presidents of countries, that these people get the development that I know that they need, but that I also believe that they deserve. So where are we? Where are we on this quest to making sure that the leaders of our world get better training? There's good news and then there's bad news. Let me start with the good news. In my years as a professor in leadership, I have seen so many leaders who are trying to get this right. Similar to me as a class president, right? They are putting all their energy into this and they really want to get better. That's the good news. The bad news, however, is the leadership development industry. And the leadership development industry is sometimes referred to as a Wild West. I don't know if you remember the Wild West, that metaphor, right? Shoot first, ask questions later. And there's one particular metaphor of the Wild West that applies to leadership development. Remember this idea of snake oil? In the Wild West, you had people who would go from town to sell snake oil, pretending that, hey, the snake oil will cure all diseases. Of course, we know now, and medical science has caught up, snake oil doesn't cure all diseases. In fact, it might be pretty harmful to you. Unfortunately, when it comes to leadership development, there is still a lot of snake oil out there. Or at the very least, there are a lot of programs out there that haven't been proven to work. And this is a billion-dollar industry, so that's a lot of money potentially wasted in making sure we get better leaders. And it doesn't have to be like this. Because as I said, we've got 100 years of research to indicate how we should be developing leaders. So what am I proposing here? What is my solution to this? I'm suggesting a very simple idea, which is, why don't we professionalize leadership? In the same way that we have the profession of a surgeon, a psychotherapist, a civil engineer, why don't we professionalize leadership such that not just any person can stand up and say, I'm a leader. No, only those people who have been certified in terms of leadership can be a leader. So imagine with me what that might look like. Imagine a different world for a moment where all of a sudden people now have L, D, R in front of their name. And LDR, leader, the same as DR, doctor, or ING, engineer, LDR in front of your name, that would mean something. It would mean that you have a basic set of skills and competencies that qualify you to be a leader. And there's more. Because it doesn't just have to be reserved to skills and competencies. LDR in front of your name, it could also mean a set of values. Think of doctors, right? They take an oath of Hippocrates. And in that oath, they swear that they will do no harm. Imagine for a moment what would happen if we have the leaders of our world take such a leadership oath, right? To make sure that they do no harm, but potentially more than that. I will end my talk now with giving you an example of what such a leadership oath could look like. And you have to imagine, at the end of a certification process, at the end of good training and development, these leaders would stand up tall and utter the following words. I choose to be a leader. And therefore, I realize that whatever I say, whatever I do, it has a meaningful impact on the lives of other human beings. And I dedicate myself to making sure that I fully understand exactly how I impact others. And in understanding my impact on others, I will dedicate myself to be a force for positive change. Thank you.